Right, okay, I'm going to get started now. So, welcome everyone who's come. Most people caught this piece of information already, but just in case you've just arrived, it's fine to chat all the way through. We won't be offended. There's loads of really good people on the call, really interesting. So you can share your news and stories and also your contact details if you want to in the chat. We're going to record the webinar and it'll be on our website afterwards. So I'll post my slides in the chat and I'll also post the video I'm going to show in the chat. And I'll also post where you can find the recording of the webinar afterwards. And Felix is on the call. He's tech support. So if anyone's having any trouble with their sound or anything else like that, you can send a message to Felix. And if he can help, then he will. So I'm Jade Bashford. I'm from the Real Farming Trust. We're a UK-wide charity and we're interested in food justice and also agroecology. So we work in a sort of unusual space in that we talk to both farmers and food banks and food poverty groups and a wide range of other organisations who are interested in changing the food system in a more strategic way. So this little piece of work came out of a much bigger programme of work called Ready Healthy Eat, and the Cyrenians in Edinburgh were one of the partners in that and did a really fantastic job. And that was about ready meals to address food poverty, but taking into consideration farming issues and social issues as well to do those ready meals really well, which they did at scale and really well. So this little idea came out of a much bigger piece of work and we wanted to showcase it because it's interesting and useful and we wanted other people to copy it. So LUSH is not a project, it's a gadget in the way that a box scheme or a farmer's market is a gadget. And it doesn't belong to us or anybody else, and there are variants of it already underway before we picked it out. But we picked it out because we wanted to promote it as a useful thing to do. So it's a practical model for supplying good food to food insecurity projects. There's my contact details. So I'd be interested to know if anyone wants to have a go at it. Anyone's just starting out, so that's why I've shared my address. And I'll put the slides in the chat in a minute. So the first thing to say is that LUSH is only a sticking plaster. No one should actually require food support, and farmers shouldn't be finding it so difficult to reach the market. So it doesn't get to the underlying issues, but as sticking plasters go, it's a very good one. So I just wanted to sort of introduce the reasons why we think it's so useful, because it's an unusual fix to problems that usually are quite difficult to fix together. So for producers, I'll say this, I know we might have some farmers on the call as well as some food poverty projects, so I'll just give the basic scenery for both of those types of bodies. So if you're a producer, and you're producing the very best quality food and taking care of the environment and so on, it makes your food more expensive. A lot of producers are scraping by. It might be assumed when you drive through the countryside, if you don't know the rural life, that farmers are raking it in. For the most part, they're not, especially if they're small. And the reason for that is that their supermarkets control supply chains. And so the producers don't get to set the prices, and it's very difficult to deal with supermarkets, especially if you're small or doing anything other than producing food as cheaply as you possibly can. So producers are having a difficult time. And in general, they're quite removed from communities of need. So it's quite difficult for them to, even if they've got free food by some miracle, managing to engage with people who need that most is actually very difficult for them to do. They're also up to their ears and super busy. So they haven't got time to be doing any kind of community or food poverty work alongside their production. And what we mean by a food hub is a sort of social space which also addresses poverty in some way. There's no such thing as food poverty. If people come unable to afford food, it means there's all kinds of other stuff going on in their lives as well. So there's a whole social situation. They tend to have a very low budget for food, and many of them are reliant on surplus food entirely that comes from fair share or wherever they can get it from. So they often don't get to choose what food they've got to give out, and it's often not nutritionally good. And often has gaps in it, in particular protein. Quite rightly, I would as well, if I was running a food bank, I prioritise volume first, calories first. If you don't have enough money, that's what you do. And then if you've got any more money than that, you prioritise nutrition over ecology. That's not the top of your list of things to worry about if you've got too many people turning up at your food project to feed. They do the best work when they're actually embedded in those communities alongside people and in their lives, which is often a long distance from a farm, geographically as well as socially. And they're most often urban. Rural food poverty is a whole other subject, and it's in general very poorly dealt with. So neither of those has any spare money. So in order to make this whole thing work, you need the food supplier, you need the community of need that's working socially, and you need money. So LUSH is unusual in that it does actually manage to fix that issue. And we like it very much for that reason. It's a good gadget. So yeah, the food hubs are generally overwhelmed by physical and social needs, emotional needs, loads of mental health issues, kids, so on. It used to be that you went to a food bank because your washing machine had broken down, your benefits were late. But now there's a lot of people who routinely can't afford to pay for food. And so the food poverty projects are dealing with people's diets. So their nutrition and their health is really affected by the quality of food that's going through those projects. Now it matters. They're quite hard to find if you're a producer. There's not one register for them all. There's a few networks where you can begin, or you can talk to me. And actually, we've made a guide of where to begin to look if you're a farmer who wants to connect with a food poverty project or a community social hub. We've given you some clues of where to begin looking. But a lot of them are under the radar, just really small scale little community groups, and there's not a central register of them or anything like that. Mainly volunteer run, so they're overworked. They often have quite poor storage. They often have quite poor processing. They haven't necessarily got a kitchen. But they're very variable. Some have got freezers, some do fresh food, some are only vegetarian, some are only do halal. They're very mixed. So if you're a farmer trying to find one to work with, you might have to look around a bit to find one that matches what it is that you can offer them. Some are referral only, but a lot of the more community-based ones are not. You don't have to prove that you're in need, but some of them you do. Some of them work in very mixed communities, so if you're well off, you pay more than if you're on a low income. Some of them serve quite mixed communities, and that can work really well. Some of them, a lot of them offer free food, but some of them offer a sort of pantry model so that it's subsidised or cheap or regulated, but it looks more like a shop because there's issues of dignity for people. They don't want to feel like they need a food bank. So there's a lot of good work gone to making places feel welcoming and more like shops. And disproportionately, they need to provide for families with kids, young people with disabilities, or people caring for people with disabilities. Or it's very mixed who needs to come in, but those groups are sort of overrepresented. So yeah, as I said, a lot of them rely on surplus food, which has all kinds of issues. You don't know what's turning up this week, and you've got to make a meal on Thursday. It could be anything. It's tracked by weight, not nutrition. So even if you have a regular supply of surplus food, it's delivered by the kilo. It's insufficient at the moment, and increasingly that's the case. There's competition for this food, so it's not only not what you want sometimes, it's also not enough sometimes. And yeah, it's not chosen. So the food projects are not getting to say what day they want it or what items they want or what they need to help with the work they're trying to deliver in their own communities. So the model's called LUSH because it's linking up suppliers and hubs. I don't really use much cosmetics. If I did, I probably wouldn't have called it that. But someone pointed out afterwards I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, that's what it's called, linking up suppliers and hubs. So this is how it works. The supplier, might be a farmer or it might be a shop selling good quality food, asks their existing customer to buy another one for someone that needs it. So you're offering a box scheme. You tend to have well-off, well-meaning customers, not always, but you can do, who want to do the right thing. So you ask them to buy 2 boxes, one for themselves and one for somebody that needs it. So you've got a bit of a marketing task there to work out how to communicate that to your particular customers. Then there's a partnership between the producer and the community food hub. So there's dialogue, you understand each other's needs, you make a relationship, In each case, that relationship's different, and how you might deliver and what you might need and what day of the week and so on. And I think that's actually really important, that urban-rural link, especially if in the end some people from the food hub get involved with the farm or vice versa, the visits. That relationship is actually one of the benefits as well as the food itself. And then the hub receives the food and usually uses that as well as to address hunger, also to generate social need in a form of a cafe or cooking or something like that. So it's got those 3 steps, LUSH. There's a little video about it to talk about the model in general. And after we've finished introducing the model itself, then I'm going to hand over to Sue and Denise, who can tell us about how they've gone about operating LUSH in where they are in Edinburgh and with the rural farm outside Edinburgh. So Felix is going to press the button, and it's a little 2-minute video. And again, it's free to share to just explain what the model is in general. Can you make it go for us, Felix? It's coming. Can you find it, Felix? I could have a go at showing it myself. It's just I think your internet might be better.
Can you see my screen?
Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah.
Here we go. That's it. Fantastic.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So we're going to have a little 2-minute video just explaining what the model is.
Okay. If I stop playing, can you see this?
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm just going to go on mute. Felix, I don't have any sound there. We should have sound with him. That's it. Lovely.
I'm Andy, and we raise cows for beef on our family farm. The way we farm encourages greater biodiversity and captures more carbon than large-scale industrial methods. The meat is pretty good too.
And my name's Sarah. I help coordinate the network of Stroud Hubs, LUSH for short. We're a group of organisations that have food pantries, and we have community cafes where we all cook and eat together.
I believe in our farming methods, but I'm up against big agribusiness and supermarkets. They're huge economies of scale, marketing and logistic departments. I have to compete hard to reach my customers on my own.
The food system is broken and we need change. At LUSH, we're not prepared to rely on supermarket surplus food, which often isn't appropriate nutritionally, and sometimes it's past its best.
We need to find solutions. We got together over a meal at the farm. I told Sarah about our business, its strengths and the challenges we face maintaining competitiveness as a small producer supplier, where we do everything ourselves, from farming, marketing to distribution.
And I told Andy about the LUSH network, how we've developed a way of targeting support for those people that most need it. We ensure that people get the healthy, nutritious food that they need.
It became clear that we might be able to help each other. I asked my customers to buy a portion of meat for someone that needs it, and I received the full retail price.
What we've set up is based on reciprocal benefits that reinforce each other's way of working. We build a stronger, more resilient and just local food system. Our relationship with suppliers like Andy means that we can offer people food with dignity. LUSH gets high-quality, nutritious food that doesn't compromise on anyone's values. It's food that we wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to access, so it restores dignity. LUSH is a win-win. It enables responsible food suppliers and food hubs to bypass supermarkets, strengthening our food system whilst putting food choices back into the hands of our community.
Great. Thanks, Felix. That's really good. All right, so that introduces the model. So it's linking up suppliers and hubs. The key points are that the producer asks their existing customers to buy another one that someone needs it. So the producer's selling more stuff and getting the full retail price, which they need. Then they make a partnership with a food poverty project or community project. There's dialogue, they get to know each other, maybe at best as a farm visit or something like that. And then the food poverty project uses the food on their own terms for the social and food projects that they're doing. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over for the rest of the session to Sue and Denise, and they're going to tell us about how they've made LUSH work in their area in Edinburgh.
Can everyone see the slides? We're all good. We're good to go. So I'm Sue. I work for Cyrenians. I run the food education project up here in Edinburgh. I've done this for nearly 11 years. We are predominantly but a homelessness charity, but homelessness is never just the result of somebody not having a roof over their head. There's always, as Jay said, it's never just that somebody but is lacking food. But there's lots of other reasons, and so we deal a lot with that as well. So but both myself and Denise will kind of introduce ourselves. We'll then talk about food poverty issues, but Denise will talk about farming issues. We'll discuss the relationship between the rural and the urban. We'll discuss what LUSH is and how does it solve some of these problems, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. And obviously the best kind of outcome would be for somebody else to think this is a great model and I would like to do it as well. And so that's what the Q&A is about. So as I said, we are homelessness but charity. We are based in Edinburgh. We talk about actually building a community, but nurturing, but trusted, but relationships. And we do that through food. We are very much about creating the spaces for people to come together and to enjoy food together, to cook together, to eat together. We do focus on but people having a good nutrition. We do try to nudge people towards a better diet, with the nudge being the operative word. We don't wag our finger at people. We realize people living on a low income, which is what I will talk about later, but don't have access to good nutritious food. And so but this model allows them to have access to nutritious food. So I'm going to hand over to Denise, who can tell you all about her lovely farm down in Berwickshire.
Thank you, Sue. Hi, everybody. My name is Denise Walton. I farm with my family, my husband and son, in southeast Berwickshire, about an hour and 10 minutes south of Edinburgh. So the image that you've got in front of you, the red circle is actually where the farm steading, the farmyard and house are. And the land in the fore of that gives you an idea of what we're farming. And most of that is within the farm. So we are an agroecological regenerative farm. We are very active and proud of being regenerative and agroecological. Agroecology is a very important part of the whole LUSH and Real Farming Trust approach. So we are actively promoting biodiversity, actively promoting nutrient density through what we farm, not just for our customers, but also for our wildlife. So working with Cyrenians, as you've already heard, it's a UK initiative. We were introduced to Cyrenians from the Pasture for Life Association, who certify our Pasture for Life scope and standard, that we don't feed any grain to or human food to any of our livestock. So I immediately contacted Sue to improve access to good quality, nutrient-dense meat by the most vulnerable in our society. So it is an agroecological initiative where we're paid and Cyrenians benefit. A quick review of what we have. So we breed and rear cattle. On the farm, we were mixed, but over the last 35 years, we've changed the way we farm to suit the farming system and our customers. We use our neighbours' pigs, which are 24/7 free range, high welfare. They've got the sun on their backs from day in, day out. And then when it comes to sheep that we actually buy in flocks of sheep on the farm. So all the animals go off our farm live, but it's the beef that we breed and the beef that we use to promote our agroecological approach to improving soil biodiversity, plant biodiversity, and insect biodiversity. Next slide, please, Sue. Thank you. So here's our on-farm butchery. It's probably got the best view of any butchers in the UK. We look right over Cheviots to the southwest, which is really fantastic. We do the run of traditional cuts, sausages, all the traditional cuts, bacon, gammons, hams. We also cook in our butchery, and we do charcuterie as well, which is a fermented meat. So it's often seen as a luxury, but actually it's extremely nutritious. So that gives you an idea of the farm as a productive unit. So we have the infrastructure along a very short food chain to supply our customers and to have control of where our products go, including being able to sign up to LUSH as Andy Rummings. And Andy and his family are actually friends of ours as well and part of our Pasture for Life network. Next slide, please.
It's not changing. What's the problem? Oh, not quite sure what's happening. It's won't. Sorry, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to come back in and see. I'm just going to stop sharing and then share again and see if it. I don't know why, I just didn't want to move.
Okay, well, I mean, then for the next slide was just looking at how it works for us. So we don't have a farm shop. We're purely online and we go out to farmers markets. There we go, how it works. So there's Sue collecting a pack for the depot for her clients. We don't have a farm shop, so people order online, but we are also at farmers markets and we also supply independent retailers. So a customer buys, whereas at Andy Rummings, they buy from his shop, they buy online, which means that it has to subscribe to our online criteria, which includes, paying at least £50 for any order, to which customers can add an order for Cyrenians. So we have a dedicated Cyrenian products page, and we've discounted Cyrenian products by 15%. So we don't make as much as we would from a standard customer, but we do cover our costs and a wee bit more. So here's an image of our homepage, and you can see the red arrow points to the link to what you can purchase or buy for Cyrenians. And then if you go onto the page, you can select a mixed selection or diced beef or minced beef. So fairly straightforward products, but not just minced and diced. It can be a little bit more interesting than that. And you can see a selection of prices, which I've already mentioned, we've reduced by 15%, but we still, it covers our costs and we make a wee bit more. Next slide, please.
Okay. So the well, we always get a great selection of meat, and I'll talk about what we do with it, but just some background around the context that we work with. So there are but 324,919 households that are currently being assessed as homeless in Scotland, but many of but those households, well, a good percentage of those households are living in but with temporary accommodation, but many of those living in temporary accommodation are living with children, where access but to cooking but facilities are very limited. So we couldn't obviously take that meat and just hand it out to people, because one, they often wouldn't know but how to cook it, but they also don't have the resources but to cook it. And so we will take that meat and we will bring people together to cook together and to sit and eat together. We also make, but Jade mentioned that we were part of a project where we made already healthy eat meals, and we are still doing that. What it means is at the time when we bring people together to cook together and eat together, we cook extra. We then tub those up, and we label them and we put them in our freezer, and then we send them off to the pantries and food banks and places where the people can come in and they can help themselves to that food. And so here is here's some examples of of what we do. You can see the food being tubbed up there. We know that it is not just but people not having enough food to eat. It's not having access to good, nutritious food. And obviously the food that we get but from Peelham Farm is very actually nutrient dense, much more so than the meat that you would find in the supermarket or meat that we would source from a buffet share. And there's a direct link between homelessness and increases in poor mental health. And probably there is also, but plenty of research out there saying that, but what you put in your body, but what you eat, but affects your mental health as well. And we know that the most deprived but fifth of adults consume 37% less fruit and vegetables, and 54% less oily fish, and 17% less with dietary fiber than the least deprived. We know the Food Foundation kind of estimate that the most deprived but fifth of the population would need to spend half of their disposable income in order to eat the Eat Well guide. And so, but very often the people who come to us, it can be the only nutritious meal that they eat in a week. But more importantly, they have but somebody to cook with, they have somebody to enjoy that food with. And I'm going to hand over to Denise.
Thank you,
So
Sue.
I've told you about the troubles we face in trying to get healthy food into people, but there's also lots of issues that the farmer has as well.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these facts and figures will already be well known to most of you on this call. But I'll repeat them because we have to keep repeating it and communicating the fact that we are all part of an extremely unfair and inefficient food chain. There's nothing efficient about a food chain that wastes at least 40% of everything that is eaten. We're also subject to incredible retailer dominance. 95% of UK food is sold through only 12 retailers. It is interesting for us that one of our growth areas as farmer suppliers here at Peelham are independent retailers. So that's an interesting trend. As farmers selling into a commodity market, there's an extremely unjust sharing of profit. The Sustain Alliance for Food and Farming, through their project called Unpicked Prices, identified that farmers often only get 1% of the profit that retailers profit from through supermarkets. So that's unjust. We're all suffering. Farmers, communities, we're suffering through health, our environment is suffering. So we are suffering at the hands of this really gross injustice. Excuse me. A very big issue of access to food grown by farmers is food commodity infrastructure and distribution. For most farmers, all they can do is sell into a commodity market. If there aren't local facilities and infrastructures for abattoirs, processing, bottling plants, mills, dehusking plants. So if your infrastructure is highly centralized, then all you can do is send your farm products to processing infrastructure that could be hundreds of miles away. As it is, incidentally, our nearest abattoir is a 3 to 4 hour truck journey for our animals. We've got nothing closer than that. But we are at least able to share a lorry with other farmers, or 2 other farmers who also have a direct supply. And then everything comes back to our butchery. So I think it's a big issue of food poverty is the fact that farmers cannot supply locally because there is not the infrastructure. And there's a big call on governments to address this, which will have huge benefits. So solutions to benefit everybody is that farmers and growers supplying to food hubs with local processing and distribution. And I have to say, we're very lucky here in the Borders. We've got a wonderful organisation called Abundant Borders, which actually has assessed the capacity to supply direct. And we've also got the Borders Food Forum. I'm delighted that Caitlin Hume is on the call, and maybe Caitlin can expand on how Borders Food Forum, Abundant Borders, and also the evolving Borders Farmers for 2045 is hoping to address the direct link from farms to local hubs. As I think Sue and Jade have already alluded to, rural food poverty is often hidden. It's often very difficult to see. Probably the most recent Scottish Borders assessment is that, we've got 14% of adults and 23% of children living in poverty, and it's an utter travesty that this is a statistic. In the rural areas, the issues of what's called rurality is that we have a lot of isolated communities, and here in the Borders, we have a relatively low density population, very poor public transport. And in fact, here in East Berwickshire, we are actually one of the least populated areas of Europe, as it happens. So we've got communities very far from supermarkets and with very poor public transport links, really, really exacerbating poverty and food poverty, loneliness, isolation, marginalization. It's a very big problem, and I don't think we know half of it. Urban community groups are often better resourced and with connections. It is at least easier to get public transport to a source of food. And also, we used to have 20 to 30 years ago, we used to have mobile shops and groceries and butchers and fishmongers that would go from village to village, farm to farm, supplying nutritious food, which of course we no longer have. So in the Borders, in rural areas, there is a very, very crucial issue of, it's not just a retail desert, but it's a food desert. Abundant Borders are also addressing that in terms of demonstrating to people how they can grow their own veg in small areas. So,
yeah.
Over to you, Sue.
Yeah, so Denise and I were talking last night, and Denise really wanted to kind of emphasize this she's already spoken about the kind of lack of infrastructure, and she was saying that kind of on-site or local processing is really essential to the LUSH, but actually model to make it work, because otherwise the farmer is forced to rely on the unjust and unequal commodities market in order to distribute their goods. And as Denise was saying, but local independent retailers have recently become a real big growth area, but for the farmers. We also talked about how important it was to use social media and with word of mouth, but from the farmers markets in order to grow had a LUSH project. And as you know, and I've got a few examples here. So in order to cut down the food miles, Denise comes to the farmers market, which is probably about, but 10 minutes drive. I'm away from but where we're based. So she comes to the farmers market at Leith on a Saturday morning, and I then pick up the food, but from there, and I bring it back to our freezer, and we then turn it into meals that people need. So, for example, there's a post I put here that the Cook School is providing the meal, but for the Bethany Night Shelter tonight, and we used the beef, but kindly donated, but the farm but the customers of the farm. And so I always put a wee little post up. I think Denise puts a wee little post up as well. We link it, and so that spreads the word about what we're doing. And we have recently started to make meals again for a food pantry down in the borders. So hopefully some of the food will be going back down to the borders, but in the form of meals to hopefully reach the people who need it, but down in but close to where Denise is. So I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Denise.
I suppose emphasizing the fact that we can do what we're doing here at Peelham because we've got our own processing butchery unit and because we've got online. So, there's sort of the technical sophistication of the internet and online, coupled with taking our product to a market, coupled with having processors on our farm in our local community, give us, if you like, the control of the product to the market. And we're pretty unusual not unusual, but pretty rare as farmers in Scotland and the UK, and that most farmers don't have this. But what we're doing, A, is very replicable, and B, very scalable, but it absolutely needs government support. It needs policy push and policy and government funding to make it happen. There are models of the costs of producing local food hubs. I don't have the facts and figures to hand, but it is certainly possible with a lot of conviction and dedication to a situation that we absolutely have got to resolve. So thank you for LUSH and thank you for Cyrenians.
And I think it's, and we're talking as well, is that, like we're hoping, well, we did hope to get some of our young people down to the farm, but the weather had other ideas. But, and Denise said, no, but please don't bring them down. It'll put them off the rural life for the life sort of thing. But but lots of, as a result of LUSH, it is not just, the meat and making meals. There is so much else that can come from it, and getting, when we're talking about kind of that link between the urban and the rural, it is great that we've got this opportunity to hopefully bring some young people down, young people who have never been out the city, and to give them a chance to come down and see the farm and to see where their food comes from, and to hopefully have more of appreciation of farmers and where their food comes from. So it's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, and I'm planning to spend a day with Sue at Cyrenian sometime soon to get that insight, which I've yet to gain.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I was going to stop sharing. And any questions?
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, I just really want to pick out two things in particular from what you said was that most farmers don't produce food, they produce tons of grain or cows. And so that point about local infrastructure is really important, and I think maybe some of the urban projects don't realise how useful they can be in meeting some of that gap. And if you're a food project looking to source good quality food, it means you've got to go to a retailer rather than a farm, and ideally a farm that is retailing. But it doesn't have to be. Lush can work with, any kind of retailer. It could be a baker or anything else. And the other thing which really struck me from when you were talking is that understanding that's grown between you. That if I speak to people who run food banks as a rule, which is a bit different to what Stu's doing, of course, they haven't got the slightest notion of what's going on with farming. They've never spoken to a farmer, and they've got no idea what impact their food choices are having on rural life or on farming, and vice versa. If I speak to farmers, they've rarely got any idea of what's going on with people who have fallen over the cliff edge financially or with their mental health and so on. So those two things really struck me when you were speaking. We're going to take some questions and we'd like to hear from people. I'm just wondering whether we could bring Robin quickly first from LEAP, because there's a loan scheme which in a rare case might just about be useful to help someone start up a LUSH. So Rob, you might want to tell us briefly about LUSH.
Hello. Sorry, to tell you briefly about LEAP.
Sorry, LEAP, yes, sorry.
Yeah, marvellous. I could tell you about LUSH. Yeah, I think probably a lot of people here will already know about us. It's basically a project where we're essentially managing funds that come from a range of social investors. So yeah, we're having a meeting this afternoon actually with the investment committee looking at the latest round. We offer loans of between 10 and £100,000 to small scale agroecological food enterprises. Predominantly up till now, we've been largely funding market gardens and veg production, and we're really keen to expand across the food system for all of the reasons that have been talked about here, really, that we need to look at a systems-wide approach. It is loan finance, so that does immediately kind of limit the usefulness to a whole kind of subsection of the sector, really, because obviously we need to look at whether loans are affordable and whether there's the right type of finance. But if people get through that hurdle, and that's largely then looking at business model and customer base and all the rest of it. There's also a grant program that's attached to it. So if people are successful with a loan, they also receive a grant, which is about supporting their social impact and kind of helping them to analyze and look at all of that as well. So the reason for being here today primarily is that obviously we're working with a lot of producers who potentially could tap into this kind of model. As you're describing it, I'm hearing some resonances with some of the businesses that have something along these lines, where it's a kind of a pay it back system where customers will donate a box if they're on holiday, or they have the option to add on a solidarity payment. But I think this is a nice kind of built-in program that really could fit into other businesses we're working with as well. That's a bit of a ramble, really, but yeah, I'm more than happy to give my details in the chat, and if anyone's got follow-up questions, or if there are questions now, I'm very happy to talk about that.
Yeah, great, thanks, Rob. So yeah, that
Thanks.
LEAP is another RFT program of work, so you'll find it on the website now. I've put my email address, so I'd like to hear from anyone who's thinking of it.
Yeah, I see had the new but Food Alliance, but actually Malak's looking for advice on how to find a farmer or producer who could deliver but to London or close to London.
All right,
I
so
don't know if you know anybody, Jade.
yes,
Or you might know Denise.
Yeah, if you scroll up, Malak, you'll find a link to the guide on how to set up LUSH, and one of the pages in there is where to begin to look for a farmer, and it lists the farmers networks you can approach. You might know Organically already. I think you're already connected with the Hornbeam, aren't you? So Organically could probably help you out with veg if you offered some kind of arrangement with them. And I'll have a look afterwards, and if you email me, Malak, I'll have a look around my networks and see if I can find someone.
Thank you, that's great.
Do we have any other questions, or alternatively, anybody who'd like to tell us what they're thinking of doing and why they're here, what they're interested in? Is anyone thinking of having a go at something like this? Already doing something like this?
I'm definitely thinking of having a go.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm the manager of a community centre here. We're in a rural area and we already have quite a lot of food initiatives. So we have a community fridge, we have emergency food provision, we have a community cafe. It's me that emailed you the other day, Jade.
Oh, wonderful.
Um, so we have a lot of that in place already. We have good relationships with 3 local farmers. There's actually a food hub here that kind of distributes local produce, but it's quite expensive, so it's not accessible for a lot of people. So I'm thinking that I could potentially use the contacts that I've already got to set up something like Lush. My issue would be is reaching the people that it's for. People here are very proud. They are very, I don't need that, thanks very much, when they really do need it. And unfortunately, things like the community fridge and especially the emergency food provision, it's not accessed by the people that really need it. And that's where we struggle a little bit is to get to those people and get them to understand that it's a good thing and it is here for them. So that would be my kind of main issue. I think probably the farmers that we know would really be up for it because they're going to be suffering the same issues as a rural producer in terms of the infrastructure and things like that. So I know they already work with food hubs. So I think they'd be quite up for that. So yeah, it's quite exciting actually to think I can do this. But as I say, it's just reaching the people that need to use it that I think would be the main problem.
You might have some advice about that, Sue. I know you've faced the same.
Yes, well, actually, Becky and I are going to have a chat online, aren't we, Becky? So I was about to say, but hopefully we can do but we're troubleshooting together, and I can share with you what sort of we've done. And let's see if we can, sort of help to get you, but to the point where people will accept the help. And I think it's about reframing it not as help.
Yes.
And I'm about actually creating spaces for people to come together and enjoy the good food together, but regardless of income. And I think if we can reframe it like that, I think you'll hopefully be a bit more successful. But we'll talk about it when we chat.
Yes, brilliant.
Very common issue, isn't it? Especially in rural areas, it's very difficult. Yeah, the one we have here in Stroud is a lot of people go there to volunteer. And in fact, I go there because I get lonely working from home. I go there for community lunch, but they receive me as a volunteer because I take some spare food off my allotment, no shame. And the same for people who are going because they can't afford dinner. They're welcomed as volunteers because they wash up, they're being useful. It's a nice vibe. It's quite difficult to do, especially difficult in a rural area, I think. There might be other people who've got some comment on that. I know other people are working with exactly the same issue. If anybody else got anything to say about Natalie, have you got your hand up? I can't see everyone's hand, so if I didn't see your hand and you want to speak, just jump in, it's fine.
No, I just have to unmute myself and hope that my bandwidth will
we can hear you.
Good. The new hand holding, like hand up thing doesn't work on mine if the bandwidth's really low. So I've got to stand here like an idiot going, yeah. I'm up in the northeast of Scotland, just in Stonehaven and its surrounds. I work at a wellbeing charity called The Haven, and I am the facilitator for Community Fridge. We did have a larder operating kind of coming out of COVID, but it just wasn't sustainable. So we moved to a community fridge model. And then also as part of my work, I'm a Landmark Alliance member organiser, and then also have been working with some other people to set up Northeast Food Link, which is aiming at supporting local small-scale agroecological farmers because we're getting less and less of them. We have the issue of rural isolation and a really high working poor population as well. So a lot of the time I can't go for funding because we don't come under the poverty index, but there's lots of silent issues in a lot of areas in Aberdeenshire. There's like 8 different wards and they were all very, very different. So, painting them all with the same brush doesn't really work. And we are also kind of hamstrung by the lack of processing facilities. A lot of small to medium scale producers have to send their animals to be processed. And recently, one of them, which is up in Speyside, which is the only closest one, was going to close to all small small animal processing. So we were looking at having to send them down to York to be. So yeah, we've got a whole plethora, the buffet of all the issues. So yeah, it's basically trying to get funding to do it. That's the really hard part, because we also exist in this grey area of like, there's a broken food system, but then there's this delineation between community food provision that's, you know, you've got to be poor and in the poverty index to have access to it, and then the small to medium scale farmers that are completely left out of subsidies and often working on their own in rural isolation as well. So there's this real schism, and we're really interested in kind of joining those two together, and that's the hard and tricky part, but I think you just got to get creative.
Yeah, thank you.
Jade, I'm thinking if we get our lottery money, we definitely need to talk but Winatli, because we're hoping to be part of but Jade and myself and a number of other people are doing is that it's very much about influence. And we are hoping if we get the money that we will be able to have something like a food conversation once a year to bring those in power but those with no power, but actually together. And
yeah,
and it sounds like these are the conversations that we need to be having in these sort of environments, and we need to be having them with the people that can actually change things.
I'm about to apply for Hubbub Community Food Hub funding, and also hopefully Community Fridge Investment Fund to try and, it's a bit out of the box, but to try and get a community food forum happening so community members can talk to local producers and the people that are growing food locally, and then what comes out of those conversations, because those voices are very often left out of food policy development. And I've been involved in the food policy development for the Northeast that Fair Food Aberdeen Show have been doing, and when we first got involved, we were like, there's no farmers on the panel, there's no community members, anyone that's there is from kind of top tier local government tackling poverty and inequality, and there's not a diverse enough range of voices for people to be, you know, cutting out that kind of middleman and just having that one-to-one conversation. And I'm hoping to kind of bring farm visits to that, so people can go out to the farms that are local, know how their food gets grown, and then everyone sit down and make a meal together and talk about things with the farmers that grow it. So I'm hoping it'll be a successful funding application, but yeah, you can't do everything for free. But yeah, those conversations really need to start happening, because yeah, I'm struggling to find out how to influence food policy in a way that translates to on the ground community kind of benefit. But yeah.
Yeah, well, please keep in touch. But Jade can well, I'll pop my email in there for anyone. But please keep in touch, because as I say, if we get this funding, we want to scale up what we're doing, and we want to bring the people together, but to have these conversations with people that can change it. And we need everybody at the table. But not just, as you said, not just the people who, not just the top down. We need a bottom up approach.
Can I just add a wee bit to Sue and to what Natalie was saying, is that it's also about bringing farmers into the conversation. So it's giving local farmers a confidence that they can be part of this effort, this conversation, this discussion, to start even in a small way growing for local communities. But there just has to be the confidence in the chain of production, from that sowing of that potato to its distribution in the right direction, and that their costs are at least covered. So that conversation needs to be had as well, as part and parcel of the conversation you, Natalie, are planning.
I've put the Open Food Network on there. If you don't know them already, they're a way to go about selling direct if you're a small farmer, but also a way of looking for farmers who are selling direct in your area. We've still got a few more minutes left, and there's loads of great people on the call we haven't heard from yet. If anybody else wants to speak, just go ahead. I can't see you putting your
We've
hand
got
up.
but Scotland the bread there. So we actually have grown some wheat and that in our community gardens, and we've made some bread from it and so forth. So I know about them, and they're just saying that they produce flour and offer solidarity flour option for customers, but to donate this, but to community organizations, but similar to the LUSH model. They also they say we also offer resources and workshops for these groups to learn how to bake with the flour, and they would be interested to know how the regular donations are and how they have built in sustainability so that demand but doesn't outstrip supply. I wonder if you would like to answer that, Denise.
Yeah, so that's really good. I'm very familiar with Scotland the bread. So, I mean, obviously, the reality is that most of our donations come the 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, because obviously Christmas and the season of goodwill slightly, generates people's sense of generosity and need. So we demand so far has never outstripped supply. But then, of course, because people are paying a contribution, which we discount as well, so we're seeing part of the give. I think it's important for people that farmers are part of the giving process. There is a natural control on what people will buy. If we don't have enough supply, then we just say, sorry, let's carry your order over to 2 or 3 weeks hence or something like that. And if we say just get 1 or 2 purchases for Cyrenians in a week, what we do is we hold on to it and then we gather it until we've got enough to make it worth Sue's while to cycle in from Portobello to pick it up, to take it to the depot. But if that doesn't work, we can make another arrangement. So the quantities are never vast, but it's the seed that's sown for the beginning of actually part of this food revolution, that we can go straight from the grower to the consumer, and in that way address issues of food poverty, which I have to say just a most appalling travesty, and just reflect extremely badly on us as a society. But we can do it. We can make it happen. But this, as I say, what we're doing is replicable, it's scalable. We need to build the confidence, and we need to participate a lot more in the conversation to make it happen as farmers. Speaking to the National Farmers Union, it's important.
I've got something to say to that as well, that the supply that you deliver as well as doesn't have to be at the time that it's paid for. It can be later to suit either the farmer or the food hub. It also doesn't have to be the products or cuts that would be easiest to sell at the time. So, you could save it up and take it at glut time. People pay you for a weekly veg box to give to someone that needs it. But in fact, what you do is you take loads of courgettes in August, because the food hub has got a community cafe and really can make use of all those courgettes that you can't sell anywhere else. Or the one you saw in the video worked really nicely because it was a meat box again. He couldn't sell the offal to his customers. His customers didn't want that. Whereas the food hubs had kitchens and the old people really like faggots. So he paid a full retail price, but he supplied it as offal, and he did it when it suited him. He didn't have to do it the same week as he was paid, and that worked for everyone. That was good. We ought to finish. It's 11 o'clock. Do we have any closing comments, rounding off comments?
Sorry, just a very wee thing, that in terms of a customer who is buying for Cyrenians, it's really important that you keep traceability of their purchase, so they know that it is going to the Cyrenian, which is why we have our purchasing for Cyrenians is part of our online network. So we've got all the records, all the invoices, everything. And so customers know that Cyrenians will benefit from their donation or from their purchase for Cyrenians. And we don't talk about donation, we talk about shopping for Cyrenians.
That's a really nice
Which
way of putting it.
is
Yeah, those
about
marketing ideas are really helpful, I think. And also giving images or ideas or feedback or videos or something from the other end that people can relate to it in some way. That seems to helping.
Yes, and like we've had lovely, but people have left like lovely but comments and things like that but Denise has passed on, about us and so I think it's the importance of that two-way process and when building a relationship but with the farmer. But so you both, like I've done but stuff with Denise at well, it was a farming, was it a Pastures for Life, or what was it that we did at the storytelling centre, Denise, again?
It was Nature Friendly Farming Network. It was the
Yes.
seminar on rethinking food,
Yeah.
which was which you contributed to.
Yeah.
Which talks about sort of food
Yeah.
poverty and changing the system in Scotland.
Yeah. But so so it's about having that relationship and but doing things but together, and things that will benefit both sides. But the people, when it benefits the people we work with, and it benefits but the farmer as well.
Right, I think we will close on that, and that's a very nice closing statement too. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's come along. Email me if you're thinking of trying to set up a LUSH, and I'll see if I can give you some pointers. And a really big thanks to Denise and Sue, and congratulations for the really fabulous work they've been doing. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Okay, well, we'll close there, and the recording will go on the Real Farming Trust website under Food Justice. You'll find it there under resources in a few days' time. Brilliant. We'll finish.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. Speak soon.
Well, thanks,
Sue.
everybody. Bye-bye, Denise. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll stay on in case you need to send anything to me before you go.
You're good? You're good, Jade? All good.
That was great, wasn't it? All right, I'm going to go.